Here we're going to take a look at the law of sines. This is part of your homework assignment, chapter 4, number 3, and I'm going to go through a little bit of a couple of examples for you. I'm not going to go over the proof of the law of sines. If you want to look that up, there are several of those on YouTube. I'm really going to just show you how to use it. The first thing we need to do is look at when you should or should not use the law of sines. First of all, whenever you're talking about using the law of sines, you always want to use it with a non-right triangle. If it is a right triangle, then you're going to use SOHCAHTOA. So we're only going to use this if it's a non-right triangle. The other thing is that we need to have an angle and its opposite side. So if I look in example 1, you'll notice I have an angle, but I'm not given its opposite side. So in this case, I cannot use the law of sines. In the other triangle that we have here, notice I do have an angle and its opposite side, but then you need at least one other piece of information. That can be the length of a side, or it could be an angle. It doesn't really matter. You can use either of them with the law of sines, as long as you have that other piece. So you have to have one angle and its opposite side. Okay, so here we have a non-right triangle. I'm given an angle and its opposite side. I'm also given another angle, and I want to find its opposite side. If we look at the formula up over here, the sine of A over A, the sine of B equals the sine of B over B equals the sine of C over C, basically we can use any of the sides that we want and any of the angles and just make it fit into our formula. So one way that you can do that is to start off by labeling the triangle A, B, and C. It doesn't really matter which one you call A, which one you call B, and which one you call C. So this would be little b, this would be little a, and this would be little c. Now, according to the formula, I can set this up as the sine of b over b equals the sine of c over c. So it'll look something like this. The sine of 120 over 35. So the sine of b over its opposite side is equal to the sine of c, which is 30, over its opposite side, which is x. Once we have the equation written there, I can cross multiply. So I'm going to get x times the sine of 120 is equal to 35 times the sine of 30. If I divide by the sine of 120, divide by the sine of 120, I should end up with x is equal to 20.21 when rounded to 2 decimal places. Now, one thing you need to be very careful of. Make sure when you're putting this in your calculator that you close the parentheses here before you do the division. If you don't, you're probably going to end up with an incorrect answer. Okay, now we're going to use the law of sines to find a missing angle. First thing I'm going to do is label my angles. So I'll call this one A, this one B, and this one C. Again, it doesn't matter which one you call A, which one you call B, and which one you call C. Once you have the angles labeled, you have to label the sides so that the opposite side is the lowercase of the angle. So, for example here, angle A, which is X, is opposite of side A. Angle B, which is 140, is opposite of side B. So in this case, I'm going to use the first one here. My equation this time will look something like this. The sine of A, which is X, over its opposite side, which is 120, is equal to the sine of B, which is 40, over its opposite side, which is 95. When I cross multiply again here, I'm going to end up with 95 times the sine of X is equal to the sine of 40 times 120. Now, usually we put this 120 out in front, and actually I'm going to rewrite it as 120 times the sine of 40. That way we don't get it mixed up and I don't actually get that 120 times 40 inside the parentheses. Now, if I want to solve for the sine of x, I divide by 95, divide by 95, so I have the sine of x equals. Now, I'm going to put this into my calculator. When I do that, I'm going to get 0.8119. Now, in order to find x, that's where I have to do the inverse sine. So in my calculator, I'm going to do second sine and then 0.8119. And when you do the inverse sine, you'll end up with 54.28. Now we're going to take a look at question number 1 from homework assignment number 3 in chapter 4, the law of sines and cosines. Notice in this one it's a little bit different because I'm going to ask you to find a couple of different things and not just one side or one angle. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and label the sides that this side over here is a little c, this side over here is little a, and this side over here is little b. And that will help me out with the formula a little bit. Now, the first question it's asking me is, what is the measure of angle C? Well, in this case, I know that there are 180 degrees in any triangle. So if I subtract angle A, which is 53, and subtract angle B, which is 48, that's going to leave me with whatever's left for angle C, which is 79. So this answer here will be 79. Okay, and now let's go ahead and find AC. Well, side AC is right here. That is going to be our B. So when I write the equation, it'll look something like this. The sine of 48 over B is equal to the sine of 79 over 7.9. Now, the reason why I use 79 and 7.9 is because this is the only angle that I know its opposite side. So now I'm going to cross multiply. When I cross multiply, I'm going to get B times the sine of 79 is equal to 7.9 times the sine of 48. So if I divide by the sine of 79, divide by the sine of 79, I end up with B is equal to 5.98. So let's go ahead and enter that one in. And then the last one I'm going to want to do is try and find side BC, which is A. So here I'm going to do the sine of 53 over A is equal to the sine of 79 over 7.9. Now, it should be worth noting that I don't want to use this answer that I just found for B because that's a rounded answer. It's not an exact value. So I always want to try and use given information if possible. There will definitely be times when you're going to have to find one answer and use that answer to find another one, but if you can avoid it, you probably should. So when we continue this one and we cross multiply, we get A times the sine of 79 is equal to 7.9 times the sine of 53. Divide by the sine of 79, divide by the sine of 79, and we end up with A is equal to 6.43. So now let's try that and see if we can get that to work here. 6.43. And now let's submit our question, and we got all those correct. Okay, so that's how you use the law of sines.